Welcome to this exploration of Anglophone rock music from the 1960s to the 1980s, where we'll discover that a straightforward 4/4 meter commonly associated with rock music can sometimes be challenged. We'll first examine the concept of metrical dissonance. Then we'll analyze how this type of metric disruption interacts with the phrase structure and form in various rock music examples. By the end of this journey, you'll gain insights into the more complex metrical practice present within the classic rock canon. Let's first define what metrical dissonance means in this context. Harold Krebs's seminal book, Fantasy Pieces: Metrical Dissonance in the Music of Robert Schumann, conceptualizes two basic types of metrical dissonance. The first one is called displacement dissonance, where the grouping of units remains the same, but they are misaligned with the underlying meter, like in a syncopated rhythm. The second type of metrical dissonance, called grouping dissonance, occurs when there is a difference between the grouping of units, such as the superimposition of duple and triple groupings in a hemiola. Krebs further distinguishes these dissonances as either direct, when the contrasting layers happen simultaneously, or indirect, when they occur successively across phrases or sections. Building on Krebs's framework, Nicole Biamonte's article, Formal Functions of Metric Dissonance in Rock Music, examines how rock music typically features indirect metrical dissonances at the rhythmic, metric, and hypermetric levels. Biamonte also demonstrates how these dissonances contribute to formal articulation in rock and conducts corpus studies surveying their usage across different rock compositions. The musical examples we'll explore are drawn from Biamonte's work, allowing us to delve into specific instances of metrical dissonance and its interaction with phrase structure and form in classic rock. We'll first examine 3 excerpts featuring rhythmic dissonance, where the underlying quadruple meter is still maintained despite the rhythmic turbulence. The first example is from the introduction of AC/DC's For Those About to Rock. Here, the guitar's accent pattern suggests a series of 4 groups of 3 and 2 groups of 2, creating a rhythmic grouping dissonance against the underlying 4/4 meter. You can see the points of consonant alignment with the quarter note beats marked by the arrows, while out-of-phase notes are bracketed with the grouping structure shown inside. The rhythmic pattern starts and finishes in sync with the 4/4 meter, but it falls out of phase in the middle, creating tension and disruption within the phrase. Let's listen to this excerpt, where the quadruple meter becomes even clearer once the drums enter. Our second example from the verse of Black Sabbath's Paranoid features an extended rhythmic displacement dissonance. After the first note on the downbeat, a continuous chain of displacements by 8th note follows. The points of consonant alignment with the underlying meter accelerate towards the second half of the phrase, especially as the last measure exhibits increased harmonic rhythm and dissonance. Let's listen to this excerpt of syncopated rhythm now. The final rhythmic dissonance example is the opening of Van Halen's Jump, which uses both displacement and grouping dissonance. Like the AC/DC example, the synthesizer rhythm can be heard as various groupings of 3 and 2. However, this excerpt differs in that the rhythmic pattern is shifted back by an 8th note, beginning with a silent initial triple grouping. Consequently, while adhering to the 4/4 meter, the rhythm only aligns on metrically weak position, the second beat of the first and third bars, and the downbeat of the hypermetrically weak second bar. Let's hear this introductory passage. Now, we'll explore metric-level dissonances that disrupt a passage's underlying meter and bar structure. An exemplary case is the changing meter in the verse of Rush's Free Will, which exhibits indirect grouping dissonance. The verse alternates between 6/4, 7/4, and 8/4 meter. Despite the metric irregularity, the melody's ascending fifth motive and anticipation of beat 2 clearly mark the beginning of each bar, while the drum part's filling rhythm delineates the bar endings. We'll revisit this example later, but first, let's hear the changing meter verse.
There are those who think that life is nothing left to chance. Take host and holy horrors to direct our aimless dance.
An indirect metric displacement dissonance occurs within the chorus of Steve Winwood's Slow Down, Sundown. Unlike the earlier rhythmic displacement dissonance where only part of the texture was shifted, here the entire texture is displaced, with the bass drum, cymbal hits, and chord changes aligning with the downbeats. This displaces the quadruple meter forward by an eighth note in the third bar before restoring it a bar later. Let's listen to this passage demonstrating a brief metric displacement dissonance.
Faded love songs and feelings in the wine, and take me down the line.
Having surveyed various cases of metrical dissonances, we'll now examine how they contribute to articulating form in rock music. Biamonte identifies that small-scale metric dissonance can serve initiating, transitional, or concluding functions. A typical concluding technique is the cadential hemiola, where the length of the perceived beat is changed, leading into a cadence. The ending of the Beatles' The End exemplifies this use of grouping dissonance. The uneven rhythm in And in the End and Love You Take set up a cadential hemiola with an even triple rhythm before returning to a slower conclusion in 4/4 meter. Let's listen to this passage.
And in the end, the love you take is equal to the love you make.
Small-scale grouping dissonance can also serve as a linking device, connecting turnarounds into the next section. This is demonstrated at the chorus-verse transition in Derek and the Dominoes' Layla. Here, instead of changing the length of the underlying quarter note pulse, the hyperbeat is shortened, telescoping into the verse. This metric slippage coincides with tonal contrast as the C-sharp minor verse abruptly follows the D minor chorus. Let's hear this partial bar link in Layla. The last type of small-scale metric dissonance functions as a tension-getting device, marking the beginning of a phrase or section before resolving later on. One example is the intro and verse of the Beatles' Martha My Dear. An extra beat in the opening phrase creates metric ambiguity, which then resolves into a regular 4/4 meter for the rest of the section. The initial motivic repetition further suggests a 2/4 plus 3/4 subdivision, an asymmetrical grouping that reinforces the initial ambiguity. Let's listen to this passage and observe how the anomalous bars gradually return to the regular quadruple meter.
Martha, my dear, though I spend my days in conversation, please remember me. Martha, my love, don't forget me. Martha, my dear, hold your head up, you silly girl.
Led Zeppelin's Kashmir similarly exhibits metric dissonance from the outset. The guitars and mellotron's rhythmic motive establishes a 3/8 note grouping, further grouped into pairs by repeated pitches, while the drums maintain a duple grouping. Together, the drums in 4/4 and the guitar in 6/8 create a direct grouping dissonance. Alongside a more free-flowing vocal line, the metrical conflict between these layers signifies the dissociative state of the narrator. Let's listen to this opening section. Notably, this example demonstrates how metric dissonance operates not only on a small scale, but also contributes to the large-scale formal design. In essence, the large-scale metric shifts created by indirect metric dissonance emphasize sectional contrasts, marking some sections as more unstable than others. In Kashmir, the metrically dissonant intro and verse eventually give way to the stable 4/4 meter of the bridge, resolving the previous tension. In this formal diagram and those that follow, sections featuring metric instability are shaded in gray. One of the most common large-scale uses of metric dissonance to create sectional contrasts is the loose verse tight chorus formal model, short as LVTC. Here, the loose and tight contrast is signified by the relative metric consonance or dissonance, but it can also be exemplified by other parameters like harmony and texture. One instance of LVTC is Alice in Chains's Them Bones. The verses are set in an asymmetrical meter of 7/4, while the refrains are in a more regular 4/4 meter, complemented by simpler rhythms and more diatonic harmonies. Let's listen to part of the song and experience the LVTC structure. The audio begins with the second 4-bar verse, moves to the first refrain, and continues through the instrumental solo, which is also in 7/4. Our final example revisits Rush's Free Will, demonstrating another LVTC structure. As shown earlier, the verse alternates between 6/4, 7/4, and 8/4 meter. Such indirect grouping dissonance within the verse is also evident in the immediately preceding intro and the following transition. In contrast, the 16-bar chorus in 4/4 is metrically consonant, providing a stable contrast to the verses. Let's listen to the song from the beginning to the first part of the chorus. We've now explored various rock music featuring metrical dissonance. Hopefully, you've gained a solid understanding of the types of metrical dissonance, how they are incorporated at different structural levels, and their functions in articulating phrase and form in classic rock. Thank you for watching.